The pioneering spirit represents to me the original trailblazer, Jesus Christ.
Welcome to the Adoption Arena podcast. Woo! I'm so excited. My name is Joy Carter, and especially a big warm welcome if you've never ever listened to us before. Get yourself your favourite beverage, get yourself your favourite food, and get comfortable. So, how is the show going to work? Well, we've got a couple of snippets. We've got about 10-minute intro of me just sharing with you some thoughts about the podcast. Then we've got the full interview with the very knowledgeable and really interesting interview with Simon Benn. It's great. And then we've got an opportunity where he's going to challenge you with some things you can maybe do at home and some great tips and some really, really interesting questions. So can I just ask you as well, keep an open mind, sit with a notepad, any questions, any thoughts that you have, please do let us know, because Simon is really always keen to answer your questions, and so am I. So please let us know your feedback. And let's go straight into those snippets. Enjoy.
There was a comedian, I don't know who it was, he used to take the mickey out of an old TV programme, and he'd say, I was born at an early age. No.
That's beautiful.
I was born at an early age. And I spend 2 hours a day listening to stuff to help me be a better version of myself. Therapists just wanted to explore the past. Coaches wanted to point me towards the future and challenge what I believe about myself right now. So the adoption world is full of people validating one another, and I find that validation just it makes the trauma worse.
So firstly, I'd like to say it is a huge honour to have the High Commissioner of South Africa, Tembi Tambo, share what her thoughts are on what a pioneering spirit means to her. Whether you believe in God or not, or the universe or whatever, don't discount what another person thinks is their truth. Because sometimes we have to look at really what also a person carries in their heart before we can necessarily just say yes or no, I'm going to like that person or receive that person's words or not. Now, 2 years ago, I met the High Commissioner at a fantastic party. And you know when you meet somebody and the hairs on the back of your head stand up? I'd never met her before, and I was slightly embarrassed for myself because I just was like, oh my gosh, I just knew that we were meant to be friends. And I even said that in a slightly probably stalkery way. It was quite embarrassing. So I want to challenge you that along your adoption, fostering or care or just life journey, just because you meet somebody who is different to yourself, don't just think, oh, I'm never going to be able to be friends with that person or connect with that person. And this is what we're going to speak a little bit more in this podcast called Truth Traveller about. That sometimes we need to run with people who are going to challenge us, who are going to maybe encourage us to go a little bit further in our life journey, in our desire to become our authentic, true selves. And that will always be a challenge. And I remember from that moment on, we talked on the phone for about 4 hours. It's one of those phone calls. And the rest, as they say, is history. I want to look at the truth of the importance of walking in truth, or to use an old-fashioned word, which I can never say properly, verisimilitude. Verisimilitude. I love that old, difficult word to say, because actually walking in truth is quite difficult, isn't it? Many politicians and diplomats are often doing a good or even a great job politically. But does their character match up to the high standard of work they do? In the past, we've all forgiven the odd, party or the odd whatever here and there. But look at the UK government. Right now, we are in the grip of Partygate. I mean, I'm not going to knock this government, but we can quite safely say I think they all went one sausage roll too far. And I love a party, but we all love a good old-fashioned Woolworths pick and mix back in the day. I love pick and mix. There's all sorts there. There's something there for everybody, or just eat whatever you want and become a bit of an all sort. But if you're going to become a pioneer, see what I did there? I love, sometimes being a comic. I love just, getting a bit of a crazy thread together. We all love a pick and mix. But if you're going to become a pioneer, I'm saying it again, if you're going to become a pioneer and reach into the life goals that you want to achieve, you've got to be a little bit picky. You know what I mean? You can't just stuff any old thing in your mouth and think you're going to get there. You've got to really be wise about who you do life with and what they carry. Now, when I met the High Commissioner, I mean, I'm not going to lie, both of her parents are legendary. We all say that, you're legendary, your parents are legendary. But in her case, her parents really are legendary. Her father, Oliver Tambo, who was the acting president of the African National Congress, the South African anti-apartheid political party. He served in exile with Nelson Mandela, and they both opened the first black law firm in South Africa. I mean, legendary. At my birthday party that she came to, I couldn't even believe it. And I was late as well. I know, I'm so embarrassing. I've got some work to do. We've all got work to do, but I really have. At my party, she gave me this incredible book, and all the notes on this will be in the bottom. There's lots of books we're going to be talking about, and Simon Benn shares some incredible books worthwhile reading as well. Please do, if you can. I want to encourage you to get this book. It's just called Tambo Lenioka, Enduring Friendships. Olaf Palme and Fablo Mbeki, you have to get this book. His writing, his pictures, his paintings, his sketches. I mean, absolutely incredible. Now, on page 49 of this book, I just have to read a little bit of some of the things he says. It's entitled, Today, You Are Not Well. What do we say when epochs renew themselves in green blades that burst tarmac asunder, forever arrest hands that tighten ropes, that squeeze and suffocate our breathing? Then what if every unseen step of every wondrous breath defies slow concrete years with giant palms along slave forts, giant and glad palms, that then tower in our lifetime. And it goes on. I just can't encourage you enough to read some of these books. Anyone who is genuinely, you feel, a pioneer to you, read, sit and study, because what they carry starts to infiltrate what you carry. And sometimes we've got to ask ourselves, are your friends pulling you up or keeping you down? Just ask yourself, who are you doing life with? This episode is called Truth Traveller, because it really does matter who we do life with. I just can't say that enough. Whether you've been adopted or fostered or in care, even more so. Even more so. Now, today's guest is Simon Benn. Last week, when I sat down to interview him, it was really interesting because I met him last year. I met him in 2021, and I did his podcast then, way back in April time. And so to meet him again, we've had a few conversations, but to meet him again, to see him on Zoom, we chatted before the interview, and I just said to him, hey, forgive me for saying, but you look like you've had some work done. You know, when you meet somebody, you haven't seen them for some time, and they just speak and sound differently. I said, have you seen a counsellor? What's happened? Because he just seems so much more like on fire and focused and incredible. And he said, Joy, no, I haven't. But what I have been doing is interviewing hundreds of more people about their life journeys. And that got me thinking, there's nothing wrong with seeing a counsellor. Listen, I had counselling when I was 24 for 2.5 years. Best thing I ever did. But there's a point in your life when you know first of all, there's a point you need to get counselling. You know, if you're there, I can't say it enough, please do it. Then there's a point in your life when you go, right, I need to come off the counselling, because you don't want to spend your whole life in counselling. But what I would encourage you to do, look forward to a life of learning. Do your own counselling if you like. Learn how to become responsible for your own future. And that is the point of power, because you can then learn from other people, not just what not to do, but also how they became the person that they are. And it's that pioneering spirit that I really want you to get excited about. And that's one of the things that I love about Simon. Now, he's going to tell you his own story himself, but on his podcast, please just go there, engage with what he says, because it's really, really powerful. So let's just dive straight in. And please, of course, do follow us, subscribe, tell your friends. Please, let's just get these conversations out there as much as you possibly can. Follow Simon, follow Laura C. If you haven't listened to her podcast already, please do, because we have to keep these conversations out. Go back to series 1 again. Listen, forward them to people that you may think it might help them. Okay, they may be a little bit grumpy with you if you say, I think you should listen to this, but you know what? It's worth it, because I've learned in my life that it's so important to be hearing good stuff, things that are going to inspire you to move forward. Let's listen and enjoy. I am joined with a friend that I met along my adoption life journey, who's also been such an inspiration to me. I'm joined with Simon Benn from Thriving Adoptees. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Joy. Good morning.
Good morning.
You said I've inspired you. I didn't even know. I didn't even know. So how have I inspired you?
Well, just with the work that you do. I mean, it's so constant. You are like you're like one of those huge drills that they use to bore through mountains, and you know they are using to rebuild the London Tube as we speak with Crossrail. You are like a Crossrail in the adoption field. You are just boring into that huge mountain and creating this incredible highway of information that people can access. That's how I see you, Simon.
Yeah. So I'm boring, but I'm not boring. Is that what you're saying? Which way do you want to go with boring?
Boring as in that.
Yeah.
I can't even remember the name. There's that. I mean, that drill is huge. It's actually got a name that they actually named the drill London, the London Underground. They gave these massive drills names. That the drills are like, I think they're like about 50 meters. I mean, they're huge, heavy things that every day and every night are building this new tunnel. literally through London. And I feel like that's what you're doing. And as a pioneer, you're literally building and drilling a new pathway to help people find out who they are, to reconnect to systems that they never thought would ever connect to. And that's why I really want people to check you out, because well, not literally check you out as in come around your house and harass you, but check you out. But check you out on your amazing Thriving Adoptees website, because it's so important, because you're not just for adoptees, but you're also for adoptive parents as well. Let's go right back to your beginning.
There was a comedian, I don't know who it was, he used to take the mickey out of an old TV program, and he'd say, I was born at an early age. No.
That's beautiful.
I was born at an early age. So I was born in 1967. Okay, and so obviously, and it was January time, like you, we're fellow Capricorns. I don't know why I mention that, because I have no truck whatsoever with star signs. I'm not into that sort of stuff. Anyway, so in 1966, here in the UK, abortion wasn't yet legalized, right? So what I discovered only like 6 or 7 years ago is that my birth mother had been dating a guy for 5 months. She'd got pregnant, and he had not wanted anything to do with the unborn baby. And so she'd had conversations with her parents, and she'd been sent off to a mother and baby's home from Blackpool, where she lived, just a little bit further, maybe 30, 40 miles away, over into Wales, to Anglesey. So she was sent to her mother and baby's home on Anglesey, which is a little island off the west coast of Wales. Then when I was due to be born, she went to a hospital in Wrexham, and that's where I was. That was where I was born. And she'd made the adoption plan. I think that's the jargon these days, but obviously not in those days. But everything was sorted before. Everything was sorted before I arrived, in terms of me, her adopting the baby that was going to be me. Probably in those days, they didn't know it was a boy or girl, you know. So that was all young. And so from there, I went to, after I was born, from the documentation I can tell, I went to a short-term foster care mother in Blackpool. And my birth mother picked me up from there and took me to the Lancashire and Liverpool, something Cheshire Adoption Council in Liverpool, and my mum and dad collected me from there. So that was all in 1967, and I was told before, so young I can't remember, that I was adopted. I had a happy childhood. I had no adoption issues whatsoever. My mum and dad were quite different. My dad was pretty obsessed with business, so I've caught that from him. So he was very creative, very obsessed, very hardworking, kind of Capricornian traits. But he's a Libra, so there you go. It's got nothing to do with the star sign.
That's a very northern man. It's a very northern trait, isn't it?
Northern trait. I don't know. Maybe the boring that I do in terms of the output of my work, I would say, is driven by my passion to help adoptees and adopted parents, but it's also drawn by my dad's obsession for work, and my mum was pretty work focused as well. So what does that mean? Well, he worked, fairly hard. Saturday mornings, Sunday afternoons, after Sunday dinner, after Sunday lunch, he would go into the dining room and he'd have this massive, he would fill a whole desk, a whole dining table full of notes of new ideas that he had to move the business forward. And then his secretary would spend all day Monday typing those up and distributing those to the people that I worked for, including me. I went into the family business. So he was very driven by business success, but he was very creative guy. Unfortunately, he died 4.5 years ago. My mum's still alive. I had no adoption issues growing up at all. My dad was more focused on business than he was on family, I'd say. He was an only child. So he wasn't my mum's one of the eldest of four sisters. So she had a far bigger kind of family dynamic. My dad's energy and time and energy went into business.
Do you have siblings as well?
Yes, I had a little sister, Penny. So she's 2 years younger than me.
Was she also adopted as well?
Adopted as well. She was adopted from a different family. So she arrived probably just around my second birthday.
So how did that make you feel? I mean, were you just like, this is your sister, let's go, basically? Was that how that happened?
Well, I was 2, so I probably wasn't thinking about it that deep.
Because I've got brothers as well who are biological. People always say, did that affect me? And I said, no, because they were the only brothers that I'd ever known. But did you think the same, or did?
Yeah, she was my parents were my parents, and my sister was my sister. It was as simple as that. My story is a lot easier than everybody's, pretty much, that I've heard of. Miles, well, literally 3,000 miles, or not. How far is it to where you were found by your parents? 2,000 miles. So it's miles apart. Our stories are miles apart, both in terms of geography, both in terms of, I'm a white guy adopted by white parents, both in terms of I had no challenges whatsoever growing up. Well, not adoption related. My dad could be tricky sometimes. He gave me a pretty hard time at work as well. And work was a far bigger causer of stress in my life than adoption.
So it's funny because our stories are very, very separate, and I'm sure that people listening will also be feeling that everyone's story is different. Who's been adopted? They're vastly different, whether you're adopted in the UK or in another region, or if you're transracial adoptee growing up in another culture. But I think we all share the same fracture point. There's always that point when you know that you've got a different story compared to everybody else. And I think for you, am I correct? Please correct me if I'm wrong, but the point that you realised things were maybe different was when you had the incident with the teddy bear. Do you want to just share a bit about that?
Yeah. On my 40th birthday, my mum and dad came round to take me and my wife out for dinner, and they brought a box of stuff that I'd never cleared out of my childhood bedroom, right, when I'd left it at whatever it was, 21, 22. And included in this box was this teddy bear, right? So my dad told my wife that the teddy bear was from my birth mother, and my wife told me. And my first reaction was one of, that's interesting. Just a gentle curiosity, or really gentle surprise. It's quite important, that, right? Gentle surprise. A couple of months later, I was telling this story to somebody about the teddy bear being from my birth mother. I had this massive, I call it like a volcano of venom spewed out red hot lava, in terms of really, really nasty things about my birth mother that I'd never thought before. And it was something like, I won't use any profanity on the show or swear. She didn't love me enough to keep me. She gave me this teddy bear as a consolation prize, right? And so there was this eruption, and the woman that I was with, I'd only met her a couple of times before, but she said, "Simon, I'm a mum myself, and I don't think it was kind of quite like that." And with that, the volcano of anger and venom just ceased. The eruption ceased, just like that. I'm clicking my fingers if the mic's not coming out. But there was a little piece of, perhaps a little bit of smoke coming out of the volcano. And there was a concern that adoption has made me unhappy. So I got to this point, business success came didn't come easy for me, right? There'd been some changes in the business. We'd sold one business. Times had changed. And business success came fairly quickly and easily for my dad. I don't know if it's easily, but it came fairly quickly, to the extent that he could afford to put me and my sister through private school within like 5 years of setting up his business. So there were some sacrifices, mostly his time, but it happened easier for him. Maybe a combination of time, his energy, his creativity, whatever it was, right? But it was harder for me. But when I got to a point of where I thought business success was kind of going to relieve my pain, my frustration with myself, my comparing myself to my dad, all that sort of stuff. When I got to some point of business success, it didn't make me happy. And then probably about a year after that, I thought the teddy bear incident happened. I thought, well, maybe that's making me sad. So I thought, right, essentially, business success hasn't made me happy. Adoption has made me sad. I need to explore this stuff. And that was those two incidents within about a year of each other sent me down on a different path, and led me to eventually, many years later, starting the Thriving Adoptees podcast.
Yeah, because it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because I think for anyone listening, there's never a right time for you to decide you want to do something and start to explore, if you like, go down that rabbit hole and start to ask questions. But there's always, I would say to anyone listening, if you know there's a trigger, or you've had that trigger where you go, right, I need to deal with this. I need to start opening up Pandora's box. I would say take it, because there's never a right time. I mean, you said you were 40. I know for me, I was 31. There's just never a right time, but the time is when you want to get those questions asked. And also to do it in a safe environment. I mean, how did you start to unpack that, if you like, that volcano? Okay, it was maybe smoldering, but what did you do to start finding your voice? Because obviously you have a voice now.
Well, I've never been quiet.
You know what I mean? You mean that voice of so
what happened?
Your truth.
First to just address some of your points, or one of your points that you just mentioned, right? When you're ready, and you'll know, listeners. Like, when you're ready, you'll know. You don't need me to tell you when you're ready. When you're ready, and when it becomes when the situation gets bad enough, right? Or when you have that huge eureka moment that says, I need to do something about it, you'll do something about it. So, like, I follow no-brainers at the moment. This is one of my new ideas, right? If I'm not sure about something, I pretty much don't do it. I only do things that are no-brainers. So what happened was, I saw a guy speak at an event, and he described how made it all, and I'm talking a mansion with its own lake, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and the wife and the kids, and it hadn't made him happy. And then he'd lost it all, almost committed suicide, and hadn't. And it was like a bit like my story on steroids. So he'd achieved more, and it hadn't made him happy.
But he'd almost lost. Yeah,
and he'd lost it all.
He'd lost it all,
and he'd realised in losing it all, he'd realised that having it all hadn't made him happy. Does that make?
Yeah, that's complete. That's it's so true. I think there's always that sense of going, when you have to look at what actually makes you happy. What is life really about? What are you missing? When you look at people who maybe you think have maybe less than you, but actually have more than you in terms of self, peace, friendship, just truth, substance. So what did that do to you, meeting that guy?
So it made me it made me question. I'd never been money motivated, but I'd never been motivated towards success or motivated towards money. I'd just been terrified about losing it all. So it just rang. It rang for me. And this guy, he has a course. Him and his partner have a course. So if people want to check him out, he's called Richard Wilkins, and his partner is called Liz Ivory, and they have something called the Ministry of Inspiration. Liz has a book called It's Not Your Fault, and I went on their course, and I discovered who I was.
That's beautiful. That's I just love those moments when you feel like you've come out from a very dark place. It's almost like I was saying, you're like that big that drilling in. Sometimes you've got to drill through, and that's why I call this podcast The Pioneering Spirit, because as a pioneer, sometimes you've just got to drill through your own rock face, knowing that you will come out in the other side, and then a place of then discovering your own truths, because you can't stay in that place of pain, of strife, of trying to fill that void within you with other things. And I think there is that drilling, and if anyone's there in that place, I mean, for me, it was, I always knew I was unhappy, and sometimes you either say, well, I'm going to stay where I am and just live in this place of poverty, if you like, mentally living this poverty spirit about who I am, what I'm about, or moving in and taking the plunge. And sometimes you've got to leave some of the old friends, you've got to leave some of the old mindsets behind you, which is when it becomes tricky. But getting with the right people who are moving forward, because then you can start to cultivate within you that pioneering spirit that you are more than what you think you are. So all that happened, and then what would you say to yourself now? I mean, how have you cultivated that pioneering spirit within you? And I don't mean that in a sort of a we're this, we're that, but I think anyone who has gone through those life traumas, you have to become a pioneer just to make that journey into yourself. So how have you engaged that now, and what are you still learning? Where are you now on that journey?
So there's discovering who we are is step one, is the end of chapter one, and then the rest of our story is discovering the nature of that identity.
So how did you start to unpack that? I mean, obviously you met this amazing guy, did the course, and then how did you link that with what you're doing today?
So I ended up selling out of the business, and having an inspiration to want to help others. Did that in different forms. I tried that in different forms, and I got really, really frustrated with that, because I did a lot of work on kids' happiness. Did a lot of work. Did work with 1,600 kids in schools, and got very frustrated by the fact that all these schools say that the kids' happiness comes first, but it doesn't. So they weren't really open. Most of them weren't really open to this. I was brought up really honest, so I do what I say I'm going to do, and sometimes it gets me into trouble because I'm a little bit too honest. But I don't lie. We've got a whole system that's set up. Well, here in the UK, the lies start at the top, and the lies perpetuate. And by the top, I mean the Prime Minister, all the politicians. So I got very frustrated with that, and eventually, the stuff that so what I did was I took what I'd learned and I turned it into stuff that changes kids' happiness and their understanding of the world, and immunizes them against bullying and all this great stuff. But nobody wanted it. I mean, I'm exaggerating. It's not nobody, but I was trying to make a living out of making a difference, and it was like it was falling on dead ears. It's really, really frustrating. And then finally, I was talking to a mentor one day, and she said, "Look, Simon, you seem to be you've been around us a long time. You seem to be struggling with what you're doing for ages. Is it time to do something different?" She said kind of that. in that instant, I saw that she was spot on. In the same way as my friend Sarah, who pointed out that I was wrong with my view of my birth mother, this woman challenged me gently and from a place of empathy, and that's, you know, in that instant I realized that I needed to make a difference in the adoption space. And somebody had actually said that to me probably 6 months before, but I thought I couldn't see a way to do it, and I let that put me off. And then 6 months later I had this insight, and that's when I started on in the adoption space. I started guesting on podcasts, and then decided to, then another mentor said, yes, Simon, you like guesting on podcasts, it's time for you to have your own. And I went, no. And I said, it's too much thrash. It's too much effort. And she said, well, no, you just need this, this, and this. You just need Zoom and Simplecast, and Canva. So Simplecast is the program, that is the software that distributes the podcast to Spotify and to iTunes and stuff like that. And Canva just used for the graphics for social media to promote that stuff. So, and that was April, and she challenged me again. You see, this is one of the big things is, everybody wants to be validated, but validation sometimes just keeps you in the hole.
Yeah, validation.
Validation. We're looking for validation. Validation, people, it keeps us in the hole. It's kept. Now, I've had a lot of coaches. I've had a lot of people, a lot of coaches, and a lot of mentors. And I've had and I've spoken to a few therapists. Therapists just wanted to explore the past. Coaches wanted to point me towards the future and challenge what I believe about myself right now. So yeah, everybody's validating, and it's the echo chamber, isn't it? So the adoption world is full of people validating one another. And I find that validation just it makes the trauma worse.
Yeah, it's like removing the trauma around the house. I mean, it's like removing the rubbish bin. You know, I'm when I say rubbish bin, I mean things that are stopping you from being who you're meant to be, which is walking in your own truth, having your own voice. And it just pulls you back, just, you know, going over it again and again. I was chatting to a friend, again, it was my birthday last week, and she was saying, I said, you look lovely. She said, oh no, I've got a problem with my image. And that's that mentality. You're always saying things which are putting yourself down and pulling you back, and not actually embracing the truth, which I thought she looked beautiful and amazing. But you've got to do that inner work, and being around people who are going to keep you in the trauma. I mean, we know all the stuff about trauma. We know that trauma lives in the body until you're able to deal with it. And even now, regularly now, I still counsel myself. I've learned how to counsel myself, how to meditate, how to heal those wounds. And if I'm not sure, I've got great people around me to sit, pray with me. I'm a Christian. Sit with me and deal with those hurts, because things are coming up all the time. But I deal with it because I don't want it to prevent me from moving forward. And so I think that self-validation is really important, because otherwise we're just going to sit around as adoptees in a group and go, my life has been traumatic, which it has been traumatic. No one's saying it hasn't been traumatic, but the question is, whether if we're going to move on to being the best version of you and the next version of you, you've got to get rid of that stuff. I've got a talk that I do, refer to it back as like having a mobile phone. No one's still talking about the old Nokias or the old Blackberries, and I love my my BlackBerry phone at the time, or the last upgrade of my Samsung Galaxy, which I've got at the moment, because we've moved on. You know, software is always updating. We don't cry about the next update, we embrace the next update, but are we actually updating ourselves? or are we still staying in a rut, in a rut in an older software program from 10 years ago, which could have glitches and isn't going to help us move forward? So I think that point is really important. We have to not be afraid as well of being wrong. When people challenge us, I'm learning all the time. When people say, or I think to myself, why am I doing that? Or people question what I'm doing. Let's question it. Let's get it out of the table. Let's not be so caught up in our traumas that we can't even have those discussions of maybe there's a better idea out there for me in that, and being around safe spaces. So I really like the way you said that, because I think it is important that this whole validation thing it's good to validate yourself. I've learned as well, self-validating myself, waking up in the morning and going, I am worthy, I am loved. Again, that's changing that echo chamber around me. And it's not living in the old echo chamber that I had when I was growing up, is I'm not good enough, I'll never be anyone. The truth is we are someone as we are today. So I also wanted to ask you, Simon, are there any things you'd like to say to people who are maybe thinking, where could they begin getting out of that situation?
Okay, so first I want to just touch on a couple of points from what you just said. First off, I've been on this stuff for 15 years, okay, and I spend 2 hours a day listening to stuff to help me be a better version of myself. Okay, so that is usually like an hour and a half walking the dog in the morning, and half an hour in the car on the way to the swimming pool, right? So I continue to learn to become in what people would call a better version of myself. I wouldn't put it quite like that, but I want to make it as real and understandable for listeners wherever they're at. Yeah. So I said, discovering who I am. I discovered who I am. However many years ago that was, 13 years ago, something like that, right? And then I said, and the rest of, and that's the first chapter, and the rest of that has been, and that's chapter, and the rest of it, the rest of my story is understanding the nature of who I truly am, and that's what I do for 2 hours a day, right? So I'm going on holiday in a couple of weeks, so I've got some trashy books, and I've got some enlightening books and inspirational books, whatever you want to call it, right? So I'm still on this, I'm still on this journey. The next thing is I want to say is the biggest thing that I learned on that course is that we are not the voice in our heads. So we've all got the inner critic, we've all got this voice on our heads, and most people are trying to shut that voice up. Trying to shut it up just makes it louder. The only thing that we can do is, or the only thing that I can do is ignore it. So it becomes an opinion, as Richard Wilkins says, an opinion that we no longer value. Okay.
And it's recognizing that voice, isn't it, as well? I think it's recognizing that voice, isn't it? The sound of the voices in your head. I think it's recognizing those, what's going on, taking control.
I don't know whether I can't control it, right? We can. I ignore it. I listen to it less than I used to do. I listen. It has less impact on me. It's less truth. It isn't the truth of who I am. It's a liar. It's a liar. It says lies. It tells me untruths, but it's not me. So I can, when I'm in a better frame of mind, I can separate between the two. I know it's there. So the next thing is, you asked me what would we do? Well, I would recommend 2 books on this subject. One is the lady, the book that I've already mentioned. So Elizabeth Ivory, It's Not Your Fault, right? So it's not your fault because you're not choosing. Most of the time, we're not choosing what we think, how we feel, or what we do. What is choosing? Simple. It's the conditioning. It's the story that we've got going on in our head. It's the voice in our head. It's all those things. What's the psychologists call it conditioning. It's our view of the world. Okay. So Elizabeth Ivory, It's Not Your Fault, on Amazon. And there's another one that's a little bit less, a bit more woo-woo, a bit more spiritual kind of thing, called The Voice of Knowledge by Don Miguel Ruiz. And The Voice of Knowledge, I've read some of those books, and they're not, I haven't got a patch on that. I'd get those books. If you prefer listening to audios and you want an easy way into this, then check out Johnny Wilkinson's interview on the High Performance podcast. So those are three or four different things. Another guy you want to check out is a bit way out. This is the guy I listen to all the time, a guy called Rupert Spira. So check him out on YouTube or on his podcast. And then if you're struggling with this primal wound issue, then check out my podcast on that. So there's a couple of different episodes of the podcast on the primal wound, because the primal wound took me down. And then, which I'm glad it did. And then I had some realizations about the primal wound, which took my whole life to a different level, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. So the primal wound is the narrative at the moment, and for me it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the more I studied the wound, the more it bled, and then I had some realizations about it which are so contradictory that they upset a lot of people. It's so counter to what most people say.
So what are most people saying? What are most people saying about the primal wound? Is it that
it's true, that there is one?
Just to encourage anyone who's feeling like, oh my gosh, where do you start? I mean, adoption is very much a lifelong journey. If you're an adoptee, or if you've fostered, or you've suffered any kind of traumatic childhood upbringing, you have to do a little bit more work to heal. And I feel that, yes, there's things that literally come up from nowhere, that I'm listening to a podcast or someone says something, and I feel maybe grieved or upset or angry. I see it now as being an opportunity to just go a little bit deeper and to go, okay, Joy, what was upsetting me? Why am I upset? And also to ask myself, what can I now do about it? So I don't see it as being a negative, as in, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be whole. But I feel I am whole, but it's just that I want to be more me. And I don't want it to be any scratches. I want to get free as much as possible. And again, all the books, all the thing that you just shared, I'm going to put in the notes at the bottom. So, and the links, I'll find all that for people listening who just want to click on a link and go and buy the book or whatever. There's a little bit of teaching that I heard the other day that that triggered an instant session for me. Obviously, birthdays can be tricky. You've got a birthday coming up. I think birthdays always make you think about your story again and where you're at. Anyway, I was listening to this truth that this lady was saying, and again, I'll discuss this in future podcasts, about how the ability to hear, your hearing is developed at the age of 6 months in the womb. You can hear what's going on. now, especially if you're an adopted person, people could be saying that you're going to, that they don't want you, or you're going somewhere. So you're being born into a fractured situation. And so that did bring up some tears, because I had a twin sister who sadly died, but it was kind of healing, because it meant that I could then go back. I've now learned how to go back into a situation, if you like, return to that area in my imagination and speak kindness over myself. And that's a meditative thing you can practice. There's loads of stuff on there, but you can actually take your mind back to that time of that fracture, having to say goodbye to my twin, being born as I was found in the bush. I've learned how to take my mind back and then to reimagine it and to speak new truths over it and deal with it and mend that in my mind. So there's lots of techniques out there, I would say to people to find ways to heal that primal wound. There's not one way, we're all very different. So I want to encourage people listening to not to be afraid of it, but to just try things, and things that are working for you to do. The imagination, is a powerful force, and we can go in there as we feel we want to, or come out of it if we feel the burden is too great. Well, just sort of summing up now, thank you so much for joining. Is there anything you'd like to say or plug or talk about that's coming up with your work, or anything you'd like to share, Simon, at the end?
Yeah, I'd like to, for people, I'd like to ask a question, and I'd like people to have a think about the question, because our answers come to us, right? There's no such thing as a second-hand epiphany, and I can't. If I could make every listener have an epiphany, I would, but I can't. We have to see them for ourselves, right? Insights come from inside us. So the question I'd like people to consider is there a difference between feeling wounded and being wounded? Is there a difference between feeling wounded and being wounded? Question one, right? Next question is, what's wounded? And I'd encourage people to not try and answer those questions straight away if they can't answer them. This stuff is deep. There's two ways of going about it, tackling it. You can kind of go for a kind of technique-y approach, which obviously that works for you. What works better for me is more the insight-y based approach. So there's two routes, and they're not mutually exclusive. But what's wounded? What's wounded? And the only thing that I have to plug is the Thriving Adoptees podcast, and there's lots of episodes on there for adoptive parents, and there's a fewer for adoptees. But check out the ones on the primal wound if you're feeling like you're bleeding, because I did when I read that book, and that's it.
Wow, thank you so much, Simon. I mean, and do please check this out. If anything's come up in you, if anything's triggered in you, like I said earlier, that's fine. Triggers are actually your friend, because it means that you've got an opportunity to maybe impact the trigger. So I just want to encourage you that you don't have to do it all now. Like Simon said, we're not, you don't have to do it all now. You can come back to this. That's a great thing about podcasts. You can come back to it when you're in a place where you feel you want to, even if it's in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But the fact that things are coming up, there are people who've walked the walks or similar paths as you're not in this at all alone. So please do check out Simon's website and all of his work, and you can also email him. All the information's on the website, and all the information on the links below. Please email him, send him any questions, or send me any questions. Follow us if you'd like to as well in social media, and follow Simon as well, because there's loads of links to incredible people that he's speaking to and engaging with. So you're not in this at all on your own.
Yeah, and I said the final thing, but I'm gonna add one more thing, right? If what I've said comes across as complete gibberish to you listeners, you probably turned off already. But if you're thinking, what is that guy on? Ignore me. Just ignore me and find somebody else. But find somebody who is further along the healing journey than you are. If that's the one piece of advice, right? If somebody's where you are at, it's no good listening. It'd be like being at the bottom of the third division of British English football, if there is such a thing. It's second division now, whatever, and being coached by a guy or a girl who isn't any better at football than you are. Find somebody, if what I say just sounds like gibberish, find somebody who's further ahead of you on the journey. Find somebody that you can learn from, that's not going to validate where you are. They might validate where you are, but then take you to where you want to be. But find somebody that's further ahead of you on the journey.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Simon, for your time. Thank you again for listening. Get with the people that you feel you have that connection with, and will challenge you to be more, go more, and can help you on with this next season. Thank you so much for listening, and we will back in 2 weeks' time. We're here every 2 weeks on a Wednesday. Wednesday afternoons is when the new podcast comes out, and that's fortnightly. In the meantime, please do listen back to our recordings, and more importantly, keep that conversation alive. God bless. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joy. Thanks, listeners.
The pioneering spirit represents to me the original trailblazer, Jesus Christ,